Our first speaker is the Honourable Ken Wyatt, AM. Ken was the first Aboriginal person to be elected to the National House of Representatives 13 years ago, and the first to hold a cabinet position with responsibility for Indigenous Australians from 2019 to 2022. Ken resigned from the Liberal Party earlier this year over the Liberal Party's position on The Voice. Ken in this is notable for his principles. It's easy to stick to your principles when those around you are doing the same. It's much harder when it actually costs you something. And tonight, Ken will bring a former Liberal perspective on why The Voice is good for the country and the input that has been had from different sides of the political spectrum up to this date. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Simon, for the welcome. To my peers, thank you for being here. But to all of you, thank you for being here. The journey began with John Howard in the 90s with a referendum for recognition in the Constitution. But that preamble was written by a poet, not consulted on, and it failed. The second phase was when Julia Gillard took over leadership from Kevin Rudd, and she committed to constitutional recognition and appointed two eminent Australians to co-chair the expert panel, Noel Pearson, who's with us tonight, and Mark Liebler. We consulted right across this nation. And the simple message that was heard time and time again: when will we be listened to? When will the messages of our needs be listened to by governments? Not by the bureaucracies, not by the NGOs, but by the people elected. And that report, when we compiled it, contained all of the information that was provided to us, even a chapter on sovereignty. And it was a true reflection of the aspirations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That report was handed to government, it was tabled, and a joint select committee, of which I was co-chair with Trish Crossing from the Northern Territory, was established. And we focused on the recommendations and what was pragmatic, what was acceptable to government, but more importantly, about how Indigenous Australians would be heard and had their feet under the tables when discussions about them occurred. To be there in co-planning, co-designing. That committee never finished its work because Parliament was prorogued and that committee fell away. And then I was at a Liberal Party state meeting, and I had somebody come up to me and say, "Congratulations, I believe you're co-chairing the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional Recognition." And I said, "I haven't seen it and I don't know about it." And sure enough, it had been written on page 6 of the Australian that I was co-chairing. So I had a discussion with the Prime Minister, who said, "I want recognition delivered in the term of my government." And later he went on to say, "I will sweat blood to make this happen." And I asked Tony at the time, "Are we serious about delivering this?" And he said, "Absolutely. I want you to think about sitting on the back veranda with your grandchildren talking to you and you saying, 'I helped achieve that.'" But as I've seen, that is not the stance that Tony took then. That committee tabled its report in both the Senate and in the House of Representatives with recommendations about constitutional recognition and a voice, a structure that would give avenues for Aboriginal people to have a say on their destiny and their aspirations. They weren't happy with that report, so they commissioned at the Referendum Council, and Noel was involved with that one. And their work was comprehensive. And when it came back to us, and I still visualise the day that we were sitting in the ante-room and we went into the meeting, and it wasn't Tony this time, it was Malcolm Turnbull as Prime Minister. And the Uluru Statement was handed over to government. And there was this stunned silence. And the voice of the Prime Minister of the day said, "This is not what we asked for." It was a report. And Mark Liebler jumped in at that point and said, "This is what Aboriginal people, through a series of conventions, have asked for. They want to walk in partnership with Australians. They want to have a role in determining their future." And then said, "We need the truth of this nation to be told." And Barnaby Joyce uttered the words, "third chamber." And that third chamber stuck. But as we left that meeting, you could see the impact on all those who'd worked extremely hard to bring forward a statement that was a gift to this country to take a way forward that would make an incredible difference. And then Noel had a discussion with Malcolm asking why and what can be considered in the context of that. I then was given a ministerial appointment, so I couldn't serve on the next Joint Select Committee. If I had, then I would have probably had a record for dealing with the same subject over 12 years. But Julie and Lisa and Senator Patrick Dodson co-chaired that. And what they came back with was a recommendation for a voice to Parliament. Because Julian had spoken to me at length about local governments and how they worked and the influence they had on state and national governments. Because they had local governments, they had the state body, and they had ALGA, which was the national body, who could all and did approach ministers of the Crown and the Executive at any time on any issue. So I gave endorsement to the concept, and Patrick and Julian completed their report, tabled it, and it was there. The point I want to make with all those reports is every federal member of Parliament had access to those points and to the reports and the points made within them. So nobody should be able to say they don't know the detail if you are elected and you have a responsibility to read. In my charter letter, there was a sentence that the Prime Minister gives you as part of what he wants you to deliver. Because ministers don't do things on their own accord. You do it in accord with the policies of the party, the direction of the Prime Minister and your Cabinet colleagues. But one sentence in there said that I was to bring forward in the term of this government recognition and a voice. And every document and briefing that I did had the same set of words. If you look at the budget papers, money was set aside for each of those initiatives. But it didn't surprise me when we had dinner at the lodge one night and there were certain people around the table and I wasn't surprised. And the PM said, "I just want to sound out from you what you think of the voice." And he went around the table and he left me to last. And having listened to the views, and I had a couple of strong supporters, but the rest were casting doubt, I said, "PM, if we're not going to legislate," because I always wanted to legislate for a local voice and a regional voice, and then stand up the national voice 18 months later, because I wanted the base fixed. And that's why I commissioned Tom Calmer, by the way, and Marcia Langton to do the work they did in the Langton-Calmer report. But that night the PM looked at me and said, "I don't think we can go forward. My comment to him was, PM, I want you to think about this. If we lose government, and I said to him, I think we will, I said, let me say to you, Labor will proceed with this, and whatever model they put into place, you're going to have to live with. You can either be proactive or we can say no. A week later, he said no, publicly, said there would be no voice. And that was the end of the work. And it didn't surprise me when there was that strong stance of no. But every initiative that we ever did, and in all of my life, all we've done is said to governments, we want to be heard. We want a seat at the table, and we want to be recognised as equal partners in shaping our destiny, not just for us, but for our children and our grandchildren. And so the political journey could have been something great. We could have had, and I believed if Josh Frydenberg was there, he would not have opposed a bipartisan support. He would have said, we will let this run. But let me say, I'm not giving up, nor are those that I walk with, because I believe in the voices of our people and their voices changing their destiny at the community and regional level so that they have the same quality of life as any other Australian who's been given an opportunity to have a future and to fulfil their aspirations. Thank you.